Queen Laura Jacobs stood before the towering windows of her chambers, watching her ladies' maid fold the deep emerald gown she'd worn to tonight's council meeting. The fabric pooled like dark water in the woman's hands, beautiful, expensive, and utterly meaningless. "You looked regal tonight, Your Majesty," the maid said softly. "The Alpha King couldn't take his eyes off you." Laura's reflection stared back with eyes that had learned not to hope. 5 years of walking these corridors alone. 5 years of monthly visits to her husband's chambers where they maintained exactly 10 feet of distance, never once touching. "Yes, perhaps," she murmured, the lie bitter on her tongue. The doors burst open. Nessa swept in carrying a scroll sealed with black wax, her face tight with fury. "Laura, you need to see this. The High Council, they've invoked the ancient accord." Laura's blood went cold. "The Northern Territories have fallen," Nessa continued, voice breaking. "They're demanding an alliance with Lord Caspian Thorn. Through marriage. Your marriage." The name hit like a physical blow. Michael's greatest enemy. "And Michael?" Silence answered her. "He accepted," Nessa whispered. "The ceremony is tomorrow night." Laura's composure held, even as something inside her shattered. Of course he'd accepted. She was a liability he could finally shed with honor. That last fragile piece of hope died tonight, silent and unmourned as her marriage had always been. Chapter 1: The Transfer Mandate. The summons came at midnight. Laura stood in Michael's private chambers for what would be the last time as his wife, and the sterile formality had never felt more suffocating. Dark wood, heavy tapestries, and that carefully maintained distance, 10 feet between them, always 10 feet, as though she carried a plague he couldn't risk catching. "The council's decision is final," Michael said, his voice as cold and measured as the first day they'd met. He stood by the fireplace, backlit by flames that cast his face in shadow. The silver crown on his dark hair caught the light, making him look more monument than man. "You'll be escorted to the East Wing at dawn. Lord Thorne's attendants will help you prepare." Laura's hands were folded carefully in front of her emerald gown, her posture perfect despite the way her world was shattering. "And you agree with this decision? The survival of the Shadow Pack is all that matters." "That's not what I asked." For the first time in 5 years, she let anger seep into her voice. "I asked if you agree." "If you—" She stopped herself, swallowing the desperate question burning in her throat. Michael's jaw tightened, the only crack in his controlled facade. "What I want is irrelevant. We are not common people, Laura. We don't have the luxury of personal desires. We." As if they'd ever been a we. "Of course," she whispered. "How foolish of me to forget." She turned to leave, taking only her dignity with her, the only thing in this castle that had ever truly been hers. Behind her, she thought she heard Michael say her name. Not Queen or Your Majesty, but Laura, soft and broken. But when she glanced back, he was staring into the fire, his expression carved from stone. The door closed between them with a finality that echoed through her bones. Chapter 2: The Rivals' Chambers. The East Wing was nothing like Michael's austere domain. Where the king's chambers were all cold stone and military efficiency, Caspian Thorn's quarters dripped with opulence, crimson silk draped across walls, golden candelabras casting warm, flickering light, and the heavy scent of incense that made Laura's head swim. "Your Majesty." Caspian's voice was smooth as aged whiskey, and when Laura turned, she found him studying her with the focused intensity of a predator sizing up prey. He was exactly as the rumors described, tall, devastatingly handsome, with auburn hair swept back from sharp features and eyes that seemed to see too much. His patterned suit was immaculate, his posture relaxed in a way Michael never allowed himself to be. Where Michael was ice and control, Caspian was fire and dangerous charm. "Lord Thorne," Laura replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Please call me Caspian. We're to be wed in mere hours." "Formality seems unnecessary." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. I must say, I've wondered about you for years. Michael's mysterious queen. Practically a ghost story the way people speak of you in whispers. Perhaps that's because I was never meant to be seen, Laura said carefully. Only possessed. Caspian's smile was sharp. Oh, darling. There's a difference between possession and claiming. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a black velvet box. This is for you. Inside lay an ornate necklace, silver vines embedded with blood-red rubies that seemed to pulse in the candlelight. It was beautiful. It was also clearly a color. May I? Every instinct screamed at Laura to refuse, but what choice did she have? She nodded. Caspian stepped behind her, and his fingers brushed the nape of her neck as he fastened the necklace. The touch was intimate, possessive, far too familiar. Beautiful, he murmured against her ear. A true queen at last. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of Michael's tower in the distance, dark, silent, offering no reprieve. I should rest, she managed. Of course. Caspian's hand lingered on her shoulder. Sleep well, my queen. Tomorrow, you belong to me. When the doors closed, Laura tore at the necklace with shaking hands. But the clasp required 2 people to remove. She was trapped. And Michael had handed over the key. Chapter 3. The Public Claim. The Great Hall had been transformed into something between a wedding venue and a war council. Banners from both kingdoms hung side by side, the silver wolf of the Shadow Pack and the crimson thorn vine of the Eastern Territories. Noble families from across the realm had gathered, drawn by morbid curiosity to witness the unprecedented transfer of a queen. Laura could feel their eyes on her like brands as she stood at the entrance in the gown Caspian's attendants had dressed her in deep red silk that clung to every curve, a far cry from the modest styles Michael had always preferred. At the head table, Caspian waited, resplendent in black and gold. His smile when he saw her was triumphant, predatory. And beside him, in the seat of honor reserved for visiting dignitaries, sat Michael. Laura's breath caught. The Alpha King wore his ceremonial armor, the crown of the Shadow Pack gleaming in the torchlight. His face was an unreadable mask, but his silver eyes tracked her every movement as she walked down the aisle, not toward him, but toward his enemy. The ceremony was mercifully brief. The High Council's spokesman droned through the legal proceedings, the dissolution of one marriage, the formation of another. Laura answered when required, her voice steady and clear. When it was done, Caspian pulled her to his side for the feast. His hand settled on her waist, low, possessive, public. Where Michael had never touched her even in private, Caspian seemed determined to make up for lost time. A toast, Caspian announced, rising with his goblet raised. The hall fell silent. To the Shadow Pack and the Eastern Territories united at last. And to my beautiful bride, Queen Laura, who brings not only her grace and beauty to our union, but the promise of the heirs I will give her. The emphasis on that last word was deliberate, cruel. A direct insult to Michael, who had failed to consummate his own marriage. Laura's eyes found Michael's across the hall. For 5 years, she'd learned to read the subtle micro-expressions that crossed his face, the only window into the man behind the crown. Now, there was nothing. Just cold, empty distance. I promise you, darling, Caspian continued, his hand sliding up to grip her shoulder possessively, fingers stroking the rubies at her throat. By this time next month, the entire realm will know you're carrying my child. The nobles erupted in cheers and applause. Laura felt bile rise in her throat. Caspian leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. Shall we retire early, wife? His hand moved from her shoulder to her chin, tilting her face up toward his in a claiming kiss that would seal their marriage before all witnesses. A goblet shattered. The sound cut through the revelry like a blade. Every head turned toward the high table where Michael sat, his hand still gripping the stem of his now-destroyed glass. Blood dripped from his palm where the crystal had cut him, but his eyes had turned pure gold. The Alpha's wolf barely contained. The ceremony, Michael said, his voice deadly soft, is not yet complete. Chapter 4. The Alpha's Fury. The temperature in the hall plummeted. Alpha dominance rolled off Michael in waves so powerful that the lesser wolves in attendance dropped to their knees, unable to withstand the pressure. Even Caspian, strong as he was, went rigid beside Laura, his confident smile freezing on his face. Michael rose from his seat with the fluid grace of a predator about to strike. The crown on his head seemed to burn with otherworldly light, and his silver eyes, now molten gold, were locked on Caspian's hand where it still gripped Laura's chin. "You will," Michael said, each word clipped and precise, "remove your hands from my wife." Now. The possessive pronoun hung in the air like a detonation. Caspian's jaw clenched. "Your Majesty, the transfer has been completed." The council. "I don't recall asking for a political lecture." Michael descended from the dais, his boots echoing on the stone floor. Every eye in the hall tracked his movement. "I said remove your hands." Michael, the High Council spokesman, tried to intervene. Silence. The Alpha command in that single word sent several nobles scrambling backward. This was no longer a king at a political ceremony. This was a primal Alpha whose mate was being touched by a rival, and the thin veneer of civilization was cracking with every step he took toward them. Laura's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. In 5 years, she'd never seen Michael like this, had never seen him lose control, never seen the wolf so close to the surface. She'd begun to believe he didn't have it in him, this passion, this fury. She'd been wrong. "The transfer was your idea," Caspian said, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "You signed the documents." "I agreed to many things I'm now choosing to revoke." Michael was close enough now that Laura could smell the pine and snow scent that always clung to him, could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. "Including the notion that any man in this hall has the right to touch what belongs to me." His hand shot out, faster than thought, and clamped down on Caspian's wrist. The rival Alpha tried to pull away, but Michael's strength was absolute. He pried Caspian's fingers from Laura's face with deliberate, controlled violence. "Laura," Michael said, and the sound of her name, not Queen or Your Majesty, sent shivers down her spine. "Come here." It wasn't a request. It was a command from the Alpha to his mate, spoken in front of the entire assembled court. Laura's body moved before her mind could catch up, drawn by instinct and 5 years of suppressed longing. She stepped away from Caspian, from the red silk gown and the collar and the promise of heirs, and moved toward Michael. Toward home. Michael's free hand caught her waist, pulling her flush against his armored chest. After 5 years of carefully maintained distance, the contact was electrifying. His hand spanned her waist like he was built to hold her there, and the heat of him seeped through the thin silk of her gown. "Mine," he growled, the word reverberating with Alpha dominance. Then, louder, to the hall, "She has always been mine. Will always be mine. And any man who thinks otherwise is welcome to challenge me for the right." The threat hung heavy in the air. Challenging a reigning Alpha king was tantamount to suicide, and everyone present knew it. Caspian's face had gone white with rage. "You're breaking the accord." "The council will." "The council," Michael interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt, "can take their accord and burn it. I am the Alpha King of the Shadow Pack. Laura is my queen, my wife, and my mate. The transfer is void." "Your Majesty." The council spokesman looked apoplectic. "The northern invasion, our alliance, will be secured through military means." Michael's arms tightened around Laura, and she felt the rapid beat of his heart against her back. "This meeting is concluded. Everyone out." "But..." "Out!" The Alpha command was absolute. Within seconds, the great hall was emptying, nobles and councilmen fleeing before the king's rage. Even Caspian retreated, though his eyes promised future retribution. When the last door slammed shut, Laura and Michael were alone in the cavernous space. The silence was deafening. Laura's hands were shaking. Michael, what did you? Don't. His voice was raw, broken. Don't say anything yet. Just let me hold you. Please. And Queen Laura Jacobs, who had endured 5 years of isolation and rejection, who had maintained her dignity through tonight's humiliation, who had learned to lock her heart behind walls of ice. She shattered. Chapter 5. The Unburdening. Michael carried her through the castle corridors like she weighed nothing, his stride long and purposeful. Laura was dimly aware of servants scrambling out of their path, of whispered conversations dying as the Alpha King passed with his queen in his arms. He didn't stop until they reached his private chambers, the room where she'd stood mere hours ago, accepting her exile with dignity. The door slammed shut behind them with enough force to rattle the frame. Then Michael set her down, and immediately the careful distance reasserted itself. He stepped back, putting those familiar 10 feet between them, and Laura felt the loss like a physical ache. I need to explain, he said, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The gold had faded from his eyes, leaving behind the familiar silver, but now they were haunted, desperate. Laura, I need to explain everything, but I don't. I don't know where to start. Try the beginning, Laura said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Try the part where you've refused to touch me for 5 years, only to suddenly decide I'm yours the moment someone else tries to claim me. That's not. Michael's jaw worked. It's not sudden. It's never been. He turned away, his shoulders rigid beneath the ceremonial armor. Do you know why I married you? Political alliance. My father's territory, your kingdom's security. Yes, that was the reason. Everyone knew. He was silent for a long moment. 3 days before our wedding, I received a letter. From Caspian Thorne. Laura's blood went cold. He'd discovered I was marrying you, Michael continued, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. And he sent me a very specific threat. He'd been studying dark magic, old curses that predated the kingdom. If I ever consummated our marriage, if I ever touched you with intent to claim you as mine, a blood curse would activate. You would die within a fortnight. Painfully. And I would be forced to watch. The words hung in the air like poison. That's... Laura couldn't breathe. That's insane. Why would you believe? Because he proved it. Michael turned to face her, and she saw tears tracking down his face, the first crack in his armor she'd ever witnessed. He sent me a demonstration. A prisoner, a woman he'd placed the curse on. I watched her die screaming when her husband tried to consummate their marriage. It took 12 days. Laura's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. Caspian wanted me to suffer, Michael said. Wanted me to marry you, to want you, because he knew I would want you, Laura, from the moment I first saw you, and then be trapped in a marriage where touching you meant killing you. It was the perfect torture. A queen I could never claim, dying slowly from rejection while I died from restraint. 5 years, Laura whispered. You stayed away from me for 5 years because of a curse? I tried everything to break it. Every witch, every scholar, every ancient text on dark magic. The answer was always the same: blood curses can only be broken by the caster, or by a force greater than the curse itself. An emotion so powerful it burns through the magic. Laura's eyes widened with understanding. Tonight, when you saw Caspian touching me, when I saw him about to claim you, about to take what was mine, Michael's voice broke. The rage, the possession, the absolute refusal to let him have you, it shattered the curse. I felt it break the moment I touched you in the hall. The magic tried to activate and burn to ash against what I felt. He dropped to his knees before her chair, this powerful Alpha King reduced to desperation. I'm sorry, he choked out. Laura, I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you. I thought distance was the only way to keep you alive. But tonight, when I saw you wearing his collar, when I heard him promise to give you the children I couldn't, I realized I'd rather risk the curse than lose you. I'd rather have one night with you and die than spend another day pretending you're not the only thing I've ever wanted. Laura's hands trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing his face, the first time she'd touched him in 5 years. He gasped at the contact, his eyes falling closed. "You should have told me," she whispered. "I know. You should have let me choose whether to risk it." "I know. 5 years, Michael. I thought you found me repulsive, undesirable. I thought I was trapped in a marriage to a man who could barely stand to be in the same room as me." "Laura, no." His hands came up to frame her face, the touch electric after so long. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Do you know how many nights I stood outside your chambers, fighting every instinct to go to you? How many times I had to leave state functions because watching you move was torture? You think I maintain distance because I don't want you? I maintain distance because if I got within touching range, I'd never let you go." The truth of it was written across his face, 5 years of restrained longing, of sacrificed desire, of love expressed through absence. "The curse is broken," Laura said, her voice trembling. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." His thumb stroked her cheekbones, and the gesture was so tender it made her ache. "I can feel it. The magic is gone. But Laura, if you don't want this, if you can't forgive." She kissed him. 5 years of loneliness, rejection, and confusion poured into that kiss. 5 years of believing she was unwanted, of crying alone in her chambers, of watching other women bear children while she remained untouched, all of it dissolved in the heat of Michael's mouth on hers. He made a sound between a groan and a prayer, his arms banding around her waist to pull her from the chair. Within seconds she was pressed against him, feeling the rapid thunder of his heart, the desperation in his touch. "Mine," he growled against her lips. "Say it. Say you're mine." "Yours," Laura gasped. "I've always been yours." The collar around her throat, Caspian's collar, suddenly felt like it was burning. Michael's eyes tracked to it, going molten gold again. "That," he said, his voice dropping to a lethal purr, "needs to come off. Now." His hands moved to the clasp, and this time Laura let him. The moment the heavy metal fell away, she could breathe again. "Better," Michael murmured, his lips finding the marks the collar had left on her throat. "But not enough. I need to replace it." "With what?" His smile against her skin was pure predatory intent. "With something that actually matters." He bit down on her throat, not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough to mark, to claim, to stamp his possession on her for all the world to see. Laura's gasp turned into a moan. 5 years, Michael whispered against her marked throat. "I have 5 years of touching to make up for. Of claiming. Of showing you exactly how much I've wanted you." His hands were already working at the laces of the red gown, Caspian's gown. "Starting with burning this dress and replacing every mark he left on you with mine." "Michael." "Say no," he challenged, his eyes meeting hers with raw vulnerability beneath the alpha dominance. "Say no, and I stop. Say yes, and I spend the rest of the night, the rest of my life, proving that you're mine in every way that matters." Laura's answer was to reach for the clasps of his armor, her fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar mechanism. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything." The last of Michael's control snapped. He swept her into his arms and carried her to the bed that had remained empty for 5 years, and finally claimed his queen the way he'd wanted to since the day they wed. Outside the chamber doors, the castle held its breath. Inside, an alpha king and his queen rewrote 5 years of loneliness into a single night of possession, passion, and promises that would never again be broken. The end. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, follow, and stay tuned for more beautiful story.